Well, hi. You know, I have something to say right here at the top. I have a bone to pick with New Year's. Okay? There's something that I don't like about this particular time of year. And let me tell you, I really do like the overall feeling. There is something really exciting about new beginnings, but every year around this time, I notice the same pattern. And December hits and everyone, including myself, slip into this funky kind of limbo, a waiting room. All right. We tell ourselves, okay, I'm just going to slow down. I'm going to take it a little easy. We'll postpone that. We'll wait till after the holidays. It's fine to hold our breath because come January, that's where the big change will happen. But this week, I had something that was really making me question that. In fact, it was just this morning on the day that I'm recording this. And I will tell you, I spent my whole weekend, this past weekend, angsting about a phone call that I had scheduled for this morning. And, when the request came through last week, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to push this phone call out a little bit so that I have some time to prepare because I told myself if I have the extra time, I will get to feel calmer. I'll have more time to take a breath. I'll have more time to get ready. But I was so anxious the whole time because I kept saying, come Monday, it'll be different. Da, 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 da. And you know what? The call ended up being completely normal. Like, no, nothing crazy. It went really well, actually. It was totally normal. And I sat there thinking at the end of it, wow, why did I torture myself all weekend when the reality is that the phone call was nothing like the story I had in my head? New Year's gives us permission to wait. And in my opinion, it feels productive because we know that we're moving towards a fresh start. If you, like me, have made a big change where you're going to eat healthier or I'm going to start running next week or whatever it is, when you set the deadline, you feel productive. But the setting of the deadline is not the productive part. You know what I'm saying? It actually oftentimes for me, it creates a holding pattern. It creates this stagnant part where you're just thinking about starting. And I don't know, for me, it just feels like a lot of wasted energy. And I think that we ease off the gas a little bit here because we think that this future version of ourselves will naturally or magically have more clarity, have more courage, feel a little bit more neutral, or will have better ideas. I don't really know. So it's that clean slate of January that sounds really comforting. But I think that it builds a wall between who we are and the action that we need to take now in order to actually have that clean start, that fresh start. Hesitation itself, I think, is a fear loop. I have a lot of friends and family who look to me and they're like, "Wow, Liz, you make decisions so quickly, like you're so clear." No, no, no. New. I make decisions quickly once I've made them, but I have a lot of my own hesitation, a lot of my own spinning that happens before I do that. It's just that once I make the decision, I'm pretty forward moving about it, which is what most people see. But hesitation itself is super sneaky, super sneaky. It feels like rest. It feels like preparing, it feels like preparation in some way. But most of the time, I think it's just fear buying more time. And the longer we wait, and I can only speak for myself, but the longer that I wait in those moments of hesitation, the louder the fear gets, the more time I have to create more stories, to develop more objections or create more obstacles or more friction points for myself. The story gets more dramatic and the stakes, in my opinion, get higher. Like the stakes get bigger and bigger. Suddenly, this idea of becoming, it starts off with being like, I'm going to be healthier come the new year. But then suddenly, by the time you're getting to the end of December, right before that new year, you've built it up into thinking that you're going to become a marathon runner. And that specific goal feels insurmountable oftentimes. The story gets more dramatic, the stakes get higher, even when nothing in reality has actually changed. So that waiting increases emotional pressure. The anticipation itself magnifies anxiety. It creates angst. And this myth that more time creates ease is a trap that I think almost all of us fall into, especially now. So I'll tell you what actually happened with this with this phone call. So I had a past client reach out to me. I haven't worked with this person before, but I've worked within their organization. And earlier last year, or earlier this year, I guess it would be, she had asked to reach out to connect so that we could talk about a potential workshop or something where I was coming in and talking about public speaking and storytelling. And at that time, I remember she had to reschedule. It was something that just didn't end up working out, and we had to reschedule. And so when I received this call or this message last week, I I saw it come through, and the first thing that came through was excitement. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Then what set in was fear. Oh my gosh, what if now I'm actually going to talk to her and she's not going to think much of me, or I'm not going to book the gig, or whatever that is. And then the third bit was the imposter syndrome started to set in. I haven't done one of these for a little while. Like, do I really, like, who do I think I am? That kind of vibe started coming into the forefront. And so I thought to myself, oh my gosh, you know what? I am just going to take a step back. I don't need to do this phone call today, even though I could have done it on that day. I'm going to go ahead and push it and say, I'm not available until Monday the following week. And so that's what we decided to do. I will say I was bookended because we have a holiday coming up. And so I thought to myself, well, I want to get it done before the holiday. So that kind of makes it better. But if I didn't have the holiday, I don't know, I might have pushed it out even further. Who knows? That said, it's not as if a few days is a long time to prepare or create like a new presentation or develop a whole new business plan. No, no, no. It was just enough time for me to really ruminate on all the things that I was afraid of and convince myself further why I was out of practice, or perhaps why it was not a right fit, right? I just had so many stories going on in my head, even though my initial feeling was excitement and drive. But that pause created more room for uncertainty to grow. And what's crazy is I'm hearing myself say this, and that's exactly the same way that it is in when they talk about negotiating, where you say something and you stop talking. And the reason you stop talking once you make your pitch is that pause, that silence starts to, that pressure starts to build. Someone needs to say something. And usually the other side, you want them to say something first. So creating that pause, that distance between what you've asked for, or perhaps the feedback you've given, or I don't know, not giving more, it creates more uncertainty in someone. And then whoever the most insecure person is basically is going to step forward and start talking first. And so that's truly what I was doing with myself. I gave myself more time to, I'm using quotation hands, to prep. I don't know what I thought I was prepping. I just needed more time pushed away from me in this phone call. And I was imagining every version of the way that this could have gone. I was imagining the awkward moments. I was imagining fumbling my words. I was imagining being asked questions that I've never been asked before. I had like a disaster movie in my head, even though I have so much data to support the conversation not going that way. But that is what the time was giving me. But then the call started, and none of it happened. It was so calm. It was normal. It was human. It was productive. And the moment I hung up, I thought, oh my God. So, really, the only hard part was everything that I invented in my head before the call started. And that really is when it kind of landed for me that clarity lives in the doing. The fear, the hesitation is what lives in the waiting. Now, I have said this before in some other episode, but I really believe that action brings answers. So, in the moment where you're not sure what to do, maybe where you are feeling insecure, there is an action that you can take, and it might not be the right move. That's the scary part. I think for me, I am someone who I want to do it right. I want to make the right move. I want to say the right thing. I want to make the right choice. But the problem with always waiting for it to be right, with always waiting to know that it's right, is that you never end up making a move. So you never find out what is right. And what I've found is that by making small moves, maybe it's not the move, but it is a small move in a direction. Maybe it is asking somebody else or looking something up or calling someone to ask clarifying questions or simply getting the appointment set, right? Sometimes it is just that little bit of action that then gives us more clarity. Action brings answers. So it might not be the answer, but it is an answer that will push us towards the right answer at some point. But I think that this hesitation, this fear of moving forward, it shows up everywhere. It shows up everywhere. And I see it constantly in my job, not only with myself, having to follow up with clients, having to check in with people when they've had a less than ideal experience in their home, right? I take a lot of responsibility for things that are not my responsibility. And because of that, it makes it hard for me to want to reach out when things are less than perfect because I don't know. I think I'm so afraid that someone is going to think that somehow I am the reason that they've discovered a leak in their roof or something like that. And so there's a lot of this pressure that comes with that. But what I found every single time that I've called someone that I've checked in, the only thing that they wanted was to be checked down on it and to be acknowledged. And I have truly created this alternative world of blame and awfulness in the other side of my head. So this hesitation, it shows up everywhere. It shows up in avoiding career moves. I mean, I have noticed myself in moments where I don't feel 100% perfect in something, I hesitate. And sometimes I'll even turn something down because the idea of taking something bigger on where I might not be absolutely perfect at it feels too scary. Um, Delaying hard conversations is a big one for me. Similar to this morning, it was not a hard conversation. It was just, it felt scary for some reason. And I've done that with clients where I know I need to make a hard call. I have played it through 100 times in my head. And yes, playing it through 100 times in my head sometimes does help me get the wording right. It does help me prepare in some way. But the likelihood that I could have prepared in a shorter period of time and still performed the same way is very high. Mostly what all of that spinning does is creates more fear because I've imagined more scenarios where the hard conversation is like 100 times harder. I've seen it where people will postpone launches or projects where this hesitation comes in. They think, oh, you know what? Like, I actually have in a month and a half, I have this trip coming up. And then after that, I'm going to so and so's wedding. And so I'm just going to put it off until then because I don't want to get overwhelmed. But then what happens is that before you've made that actual jump, uh, you've spent all of this time imagining the hard thing. And in this specific scenario, that trip and that wedding is happening right before you're supposed to launch. You're not going to get anything done anyway. And something that my husband reminded me when we were younger and I was thinking about going back to school, because I thought to myself, well, if I go back to school for something completely unrelated, that is how I will prove that I am qualified. If I go back to school, I do this thing and then I start my business or whatever it is later. And something that he had said to me was like, you going back to school to learn how to do this thing will not only put you in debt because you're going to have to go back to school, but number two, it's going to mean that you're starting 2 years later or 3 years later, when in fact, you could start now. You could learn on the job. And yes, you might make some mistakes, but it's not going to put you in more debt than what it would be for you to go back to school for this thing. And in fact, you'll probably learn a lot faster. And then at the end of those 2 or 3 years, you'll have an actual business instead of still just the dream of starting a business with some school debt. And I remember thinking to myself, that is crazy. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, oh my God, that's totally it. I keep thinking that I need more time to prepare, to prove to myself that I can actually take this step. Um, and that's been the lie that I've told myself. I've seen people wait to ask for what they want, and I have done it even myself, where I wait longer because I think that if I have more time to prepare, I'm thinking about the other side. Well, I'll wait until they're in this particular. It's just constant waiting, right? And ultimately, that conversation is most likely not going to change with that extra time, and even simple tasks that feel heavier because we put them off. This is something that Gretchen Rubin talks about in her book, The Happiness Project. And it's this idea of these tasks that are plenty, but they are small. So they take very little time, but there's a lot of them. And it's especially the ones that have multiple steps. So one of the things that we did today was working on our health insurance. And so this first step that we needed to take was to book the appointment with our insurance broker, was to simply book the appointment. For some reason, it took me weeks to go into the system and book that appointment so that I could have someone walk me through it. Once we got onto the insurance call, we then found out that there were some issues with voters' citizen paperwork. And so we needed to call somebody else to get that figured out, to work through that. But the whole thing is that if I hadn't booked that first phone call with our insurance broker, we would not have known. So we would have continued to put this off and off and off and off. And if we hadn't chosen our insurance, if we hadn't done that before the 15th, we wouldn't have had the time to do the other tasks that evolved once we did it. And so Gretchen Rubin talks about taking those small tasks and agreeing to do like one of them, just one, because getting that ball rolling, even if it's not the whole task, getting that ball rolling is better than the waiting and hoping you'll get all of it taken care of at one time. It's insurmountable. There are so many of those. And by continuing to let all of those, so many of those tasks stay there, they get heavier and heavier and heavier. And I think that we tell ourselves that doing this later will feel easier because it feels a little hard right now. So we're like, well, later, that will feel easier. But if later comes with more dread, was waiting ever actually helping? The answer is no. There is a right answer to this. And I think that New Year's makes this habit harder. It makes it harder, in my opinion. I think there's this cultural pressure to set goals and to change who you are and to be different come January. So December, there are memes about it. December becomes the month of postponement, right? It's like as soon as December hits, there's all these memes about people putting, "Hey, we'll get to this after the holidays," on all of their emails. And I think that with that, yes, it means you get to take a little bit of time off, which I do think is important, but it does mean that there's this sense of impending doom because you know that starting in the new year, a big shift is required. So there's guilt mixed in with the comfort of the waiting. And again, I think that there is a belief that readiness, that New Year's Day, that readiness feeling is a date on the calendar. And it's just not. That is why you see such a huge increase of people who sign up for gym memberships and then they're done a month later, 2 months later, they fall off that train because it wasn't about the date. It was never about the date. And again, I love a fresh start as much as anyone. I do. I think it's really fun. But a fresh start does not require a new year. It just requires a little moment of courage right now. So, my case for doing it now, just do it as Nike says, that moment that you take the first step, even a teeny tiny step, the fear shrinks. The fear gets smaller because it loses its structure that you created in your brain. It loses its shape. It becomes something that you can actually start to work with because now you've got your hands in it. And suddenly you realize, wow, why did I make this thing so big and so hard in my brain? Readiness is not something that we wait for. It is something that we create by starting to show up, even in teeny tiny ways. Action collapses fear. Like I said, action brings answers. And the more answers you have, the less fear you feel in many cases. That's not always true. But in many cases that is how it feels. Small steps, the teeny tiny ones are the ones that build momentum. Nothing starts off as huge as much as the internet would like to tell us. It's always the small tiny steps, even just starting the getting up 5 minutes earlier, the getting yourself to the gym, right? Not even to work out, but just getting to the gym. Courage grows the more you use it. Use it or lose it, honey. And then reality can it replace imagination once you've actually gotten into the weeds a little bit. I think about this too. I had a client, one of my fitness clients actually, who I had messaged them because I noticed they weren't in my classes as much. And I I'd seen them almost regularly for a long time, and I had noticed that they were on my roster, but then they weren't showing up. And so I thought, well, geez, I'm going to send them a message. So I did. I sent them a message and I said, hey, I could have sworn I saw you on my roster today. But then I didn't see you in class. Like, is everything good? I haven't seen you in a while. And this person shared that they've been having a really tough time and there is a lot more backstory. There's a lot going on. And they had asked me for some tips on how to make it to class. And I just said, listen, I don't have the answer for how to make you get out of bed. Because for me personally, a cancellation fee is enough to get me out of bed. That's just me. I'm a Capricorn. I don't know what to tell you. If it's a $15 or $25 cancellation fee, you will see me on that mat no matter what the time. But um, if that's not motivation enough for you, I said my only hope, my only request is that you would simply make it to the gym. If you get to my class and the only thing you can do is lie on your mat the whole time and just listen to the music, that's it. Take the pressure off of doing the big thing that feels really hard. Just get yourself to the gym. And if you don't want to do anything once you're there, perfect. That's the win for the day. But that is the tiny movement that I'm asking for. And most likely, what you'll find is once you're in it, once that person was in the room, most likely it's going to feel better to get up and do something, to do a song or two, to stick with me in the class because they took that one step. So my tools for you and for myself today is it's these tools for maybe helping you get going, just doing the dang thing. And the first one is the 5-minute rule. You only have to start it for 5 minutes. This is similar to what I told my client. You only have to start for 5 minutes. Most of the time, the starting is all you need. You usually finish it. But if you make the goal so small that I'm going to sit down and write for 5 minutes, I'm going to make the call, get on the phone and say, I only have 5 minutes to chat, whatever that sounds like, get 5 minutes of that productivity in, of that action in, and then decide where you want to go from there. If that's all you got today, that's all you got today. The second bit is utilizing your micro courage. Micro courage. Again, tiny moves, one small, brave move today instead of a huge, big, brave move someday. This one tiny, brave move today was me just going in and booking the appointment with our insurance broker. It is the making the phone call to your doctor to see what days they have available for the appointment. It is like the thing. Now, sometimes I know those things turn into much bigger, much bigger things once you start them. But like I said, you will then have your hands in it. So it's going to feel more malleable. You'll be able to work with it more. The next bit is reality check. Ask yourself constantly, what story am I telling myself? And what proof do I actually have that this exists? This is what I should have used on myself earlier last week. I should have asked myself, why are you suddenly deciding that you don't know what you're doing and that you don't know how to give presentations and that you aren't good enough to be speaking to this company? You've done it multiple times before. You've been paid for your work and the feedback you've gotten has been overall very positive. So where is this story that suddenly I don't know what I'm doing coming up that is convincing me that waiting would be better? Lastly, name the reason that you are waiting. Sometimes I think that saying this reason out loud and being realistic with yourself, not like I'm going to use the time. If it truly is, then fine. But I knew when I said, I'm going to wait until next week, I wasn't going to get on my computer and redo my presentation. I wasn't going to go and change anything. Yes, I probably needed a minute to look it over, but that took me all of 5 minutes to make sure that I kind of remembered what my objective is here. But saying it out loud makes it pretty obvious whether or not that reason is made up. So, if you can use one of these tools, I would recommend that we choose at least one small thing we can do before the new year instead of after it. One small thing. That way, when the clock hits midnight, you are truly starting on the new year, not getting the prep work started when you thought you would already be in the thick of it. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway, that phone call reminded me that hesitation is not protection, that the waiting um is not freedom. It's pressure. It's fear, and pressure grows in that pause. Just like I mentioned earlier with the negotiations, it grows in the pause. So if there's something that you are putting off, something that you keep handing to your future self, she'll take care of it when it's January 1st. Ask yourself if the waiting is helping or if the waiting is truly hurting. Fear grows in the delay, but confidence grows in the doing. So I think we should choose to shrink that fear a little bit right now. Just do it. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, that is all I have for you today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Kind of a Bitch. We have a few more episodes before 2025 is over. This is episode 44, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just truly so grateful that you're here and that you're showing up. If you have any questions or feedback, please, as always, get in touch. But other than that, I will chat with you next week. Bye.